G'day guys, I'm David from the Xylem Zone here. Up in Brisbane today and just checking out some of this high-rise behind me down the harbour there. There's obviously a very, very big CBD, so I thought I'd just talk today about the places that the black zones or the dead zones or the places that a sophisticated investor won't buy. And this is pointing it to off the plan and units specifically, because there's some real different strategies in different markets that are being touted as areas to purchase in, but really can be a death trap for you and really get your money tied up and put you at great risk if the valuations don't stack up. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the capital CBDs of most cities. That's the downtown area where it's all the high rises and very, very high density. And, probably the Gold Coast foreshore would be included in that as well, because there's a lot of high rise there as well. So why am I saying you don't touch that area? Well, there's areas, if you probably remember, down in Melbourne called the Docklands. There's people that purchased there and expected to make a lot of money. And the reality is that the values haven't increased substantially over a long, long period of time. So why is that the case? Because there was so much stock that went into the market, because there was tower after tower after tower after tower. If you think about that same scenario on the Gold Coast, Q1 was another one where people purchased in there a very, very long-term off-the-plan property, and some of the values by the time they settled, because so much stock had come into the market, had dropped by 20, 30, 40%, which meant that the consequence for the people that put the deposits down, they couldn't get the finance and couldn't get the loan. In Adelaide CBD, I've had some people that purchased there that the values dropped so much between when it was starting to being built to when it was completed that some banks actually refused to actually even offer a loan for the products they were looking at and the developments they were looking at as well. So again, you need to be very, very specific about the type of property that you're looking at and choosing, and also, is it a long-term play or a short-term play? And what's one of the biggest things that can actually have an impact? We think of the Brisbane market up here, it was potentially tipped to go off and have some really, really good growth, because Sydney had gone up substantially, Melbourne had some growth, and Brisbane was tipped to go up. And what happened? There was a lot of money flooded into the market in the last couple of years, and that was all done from overseas investors. And where do a lot of these overseas investors purchase? Well, they're being sold to, in this case, a lot of it was in China, and the Foreign Investment Review Board, which dictates how many properties can be sold to foreigners, had a policy there. They were then obviously sold to in their own country from people that represented developers and things in Australia. And a lot of those people put their money into developments, and all of a sudden, in a period of time, there was a massive oversupply of stock to keep up with these overseas sales. And then within a period of time, once they settled, a lot of the valuations came in very, very low, and people were then falling out. That was very evident in Melbourne about 18 months ago, when people were defaulting from their loans because they couldn't settle, and they were being then resold through marketing companies to Australians to pick up at a discounted rate. So that's probably not the best. That's the better place to be in, if you can pick up that property at a discounted rate when someone else has defaulted, but you're still buying a property in an area that's massively oversupplied. And how many years have you got to sit there and wait before you can make any money? So again, this is back to your strategy, and does that strategy of off the plan in a high-rise apartment, really match with what you're trying to achieve? Is it going to give you fast capital growth? Well, there's nothing to suggest that in our current economic situations, any of those downtown areas is going to give you fast capital growth. There's no suggestions thinking that the market's going to go up really, really fast in any short period of time. And I would be factoring in, probably 10 to 14 years, in some cases 20 years, to see capital growth in some of those areas with this specific type of property. But is there money to be had in units? I'm not anti-units. I own quite a few units, but the reality is I would only be buying them in that 5k radius to 10k radius outside the CBD, and I'd be trying to get low density in small blocks, from anything from 4 to 10 to 12 to 20. I wouldn't go more than 50 ideally, and I'd be looking at the infrastructure. I'd be looking at the supply. I definitely want an area where there's not a lot of stock coming onto the market, not a lot of available land, and not much stuff coming through council for approval as well. So you need some pretty good data there, and that's not all easy to get, but that's obviously the type of things we look at when we're going out there looking for properties. But as a rule of thumb, keep away from those dead zones. You can be crucified on valuations, you can be crucified on LVRs, the mortgage insurer might not lend there, and basically you could be sitting in that market with a very negative cash flow because of the low rents, because of oversupply, and not make any capital growth for many years, and that property can become a real burden. So keep away from those areas as a rule of thumb, unless you can pick it up, unless you're buying in cash and you can get an amazing discount like 50% off and you're prepared to hold it long term. I'd stick to those areas out from there and look at areas that are more blue chip and definitely have the demand there and the market drivers. Anyway, that's David from the Xylem Zone. That's another property con from today, and a little bit grayer up here in Brisbane, so hopefully we'll get some rain, but hopefully that's been useful and yeah, useful to you in your situation going forward. Thanks again.